Hello, this is Morale Bernard, considering Black History Month and the evil topic of slavery. So, an account of the slave trade, a true account. On the arrival of the ships at Bonny and New Calabar, it is customary for them to unbend the sails, strike the yards and topmast, and begin to build what they denominate a house. This is effected in the following manner. The sailors first lash the booms and yards from mast to mast in order to form a ridgepole. About 10 feet above the deck, several spars, equal in length to the ridgepole, are next lashed to the standing rigging and form a wall plate. Across the ridgepole and wall plate, several other spars or rafters are afterwards laid and lashed at the distance of about 6 inches from each other. On these other rafters or spars are laid lengthwise, equal in extent to the ridgepole, so as to form a kind of lattice or network, with interfaces of 6 inches square. The roof is then covered with mats, made of rushes of very loose texture, fastened together with rope yarn, and so placed as to lap over each other like tiles. The space between the deck and the wall plate is likewise enclosed with a kind of lattice or network formed of sticks, lashed across each other and leaving vacancies of about 4 inches square. Near the main mast, a partition is constructed of inch deal boards, which reaches athwart the ship. This division is called a barricado. It is about 8 feet in height and is made to project near 2 feet over the sides of the ship. In this barricado there is a door, at which a sentinel is placed during the time the Negroes are permitted to come upon deck. It serves to keep the different sexes apart, and as there are small holes in it, wherein blunderbusses are fixed and sometimes a cannon, it is found very convenient for quelling the insurrections that now and then happen. Another door is made in the lattice or network at the ladder by which you enter the ship. This door is guarded by a sentinel during the day and is locked at night. At the head of the ship there is a third door for the use of the sailors, which is secured in the same manner as that at the gangway. There is also in the roof a large trap door through which the goods intended for barter, the water cask, are hoisted out or in. The design of this house is to secure those on board from the heat of the sun, which in this latitude is intense, and from the wind and rain, which at particular seasons are likewise extremely violent. It answers these purposes, however, but very ineffectually. The slight texture of the mats admits both the wind and the rain, whenever it happens to be violent, though at the same time it increases the heat of the ship to a very pernicious degree, especially between decks. The increased warmth occasioned by this means, together with the smoke produced from the green mangrove, the usual firewood, which, for want of a current of air to carry it off, collects itself in large quantities and infest every part of the ship, render a vessel during its stay here very unhealthy. The smoke also, by its acrimonious quality, often produces inflammations in the eyes, which terminate sometimes in the loss of sight. Another purpose for which these temporary houses are erected is in order to prevent the purchased Negroes from leaping overboard. This, the horrors of their situation frequently impel them to attempt, and they now and then effect it, notwithstanding all the precautions that are taken, by forcing their way through the lattice work. The slave ships generally lie near a mile below the town in Bonny River, in 7 or 8 fathom water, sometimes 15 sail. English and French, but chiefly the former, meet here together. Soon after they cast anchor, the captains go on shore to make known their arrival, and to inquire into the state of the trade. They likewise invite the kings of Bonny to come on board, to whom, previous to break in bulk, they usually make presents, in that country term dashes, which generally consist of pieces of cloth, cotton, chintz, silk handkerchiefs, and other India goods, and sometimes of brandy, wine, or beer. When I was at Bonny a few years ago, it was the residence of 2 kings, whose names were Norfolk and Pepple. The houses of these princes were not distinguished from the cottages or huts of which the town consists, in any other manner than by being of somewhat larger dimensions, and surrounded with warehouses containing European goods designed for the purchase of slaves. These slaves, which the kings procure in the same manner as the black traders do theirs, are sold by them to the ships. And for every Negro sold there by the traders, the kings receive a duty, which amounts to a considerable sum in the course of a year. This duty is collected by officers stationed on board the ships, who are termed officer boys, a denomination which it is thought they received from the English. The kings of Bonny are absolute, though elective. They are assisted in the government by a small number of persons of a certain rank, who style themselves Parliament gentlemen, an office which they generally hold for life. Every ship, on its arrival, is expected to send a present to these gentlemen of a small quantity of bread and beef, and likewise to treat them as often as they come on board. When they do this, their approach to the ship is announced by blowing through a hollow elephant's tooth, which produces a sound resembling that of a post horn. After the kings have been on board and have received the usual presents, permission is granted for them for trafficking with any of the black traders. When the royal guests return from the ships, they are saluted by the guns. From the time of the arrival of the ships to their departure, which is usually nearly 3 months, scarce a day passes without some Negroes being purchased and carried on board, sometimes in small and sometimes in larger numbers. The whole number taken on board depends, in a great measure, on circumstances. In a voyage I once made, our stock of merchandise was exhausted in the purchase of about 380 Negroes, which was expected to have procured 500. The number of English and French ships then at Bonny had so far raised the price of Negroes as to occasion this difference. The reverse, and a happy reverse I think I may call it, was known during the late war. When I was last at Bonny, I frequently made inquiries on this head of one of the black traders, whose intelligence I believe I can depend upon. He informed me that only one ship had been there for 3 years during that period, and that was the Molesley Hill, Captain Ewan, from Liverpool, who made an extraordinary purchase as he found Negroes remarkably cheap from the dullness of trade. Upon further inquiring of my black acquaintance what was the consequence of this decay of their trade, he shrugged up his shoulders and answered, "Only making us traders poorer, and obliging us to work for our maintenance." One of these black merchants being informed that a particular set of people called Quakers were for abolishing the trade, he said, it was a very bad thing, as they should then be reduced to the same state they were in during the war, when through poverty they were obliged to dig the ground and plant yams. I was once upon the coast of Angola also, when there had not been a slave ship at the river Ambris for 5 years previous to our arrival, although a place to which many usually resort every year, and the failure of the trade for that period, as far as we could learn, had not any other effect than to restore peace and confidence among the natives, which upon the arrival of any ships is immediately destroyed, by the inducement then held forth in the purchase of slaves. And during the suspension of trade at Bonny, as above mentioned, none of the dreadful proceedings which are so confidently asserted to be the natural consequence of it were known. The reduction of the price of Negroes and the poverty of the black traders appear to have been the only bad effects of the discontinuance of trade. The good ones were, most probably, the restoration of peace and confidence among the natives, and a suspension of kidnapping. When the ships have disposed of all their merchandise in the purchase of Negroes, and have laid in their stock of wood, water, and yams, they prepare for sailing, by getting up the yards and topmast, revving the running rigging, bending the sails, and by taking down the temporary house. They then drop down the river to wait for a favourable opportunity to pass over the bar, which is formed by a number of sandbanks lying across the mouth of the river, with navigable channels between them. It is not uncommon for ships to get upon the bar, and sometimes they are lost. The first place the slave ships touch at in their passage to the West Indies is either the island of St. Thomas or Princess Island, where they usually carry their sick on shore for the benefit of the air, and likewise replenish their stock of water. The former of these islands is nearly circular, being 120 miles round, and lies exactly under the equator, about 45 leagues from the African continent. It abounds with wood and water, and produces Indian corn, rice, fruits, sugar, and some cinnamon. The air is rather prejudicial to an European constitution. Nevertheless, it is well peopled by the Portuguese. Princess Island, which is much smaller, lies in 1 degrees 30 minutes north latitude, and likewise produces Indian corn and a variety of fruits and roots, besides sugar canes. Black cattle, hogs, and goats are numerous there, but it is infested with a mischievous and dangerous species of monkeys. During one of the voyages I made, I was landed upon the island of St. Thomas with near 100 sick Negroes, who were placed in an old house taken on purpose for their reception. Little benefit, however, occurred from their going on shore, as several of them died there, and the remainder continued nearly in the same situation as when they were landed. Though our continence was prolonged for about 12 days, and the island is deemed upon the whole healthy. Upon the arrival of the slave ships in the West Indies, a day is soon fixed for the sale of their cargoes, and this is done by different modes, and often by one they term a scramble, of which some account will be given when the sale of the Negroes is treated of. The whole of their cargoes being disposed of, the ships are immediately made ready to proceed to sea. It is very seldom, however, that they are not detained for want of a sufficient number of sailors to navigate the ship, as this trade may justly be denominated the grave of seamen. Though the crews of the ships upon their leaving England generally amount to between 40 and 50 men, scarcely 3/4, and sometimes not 1/3 of the complement ever return to the port from whence they sailed, through mortality and desertion, the causes of which I shall speak of under another head. The time during which the slave ships are absent from England varies according to the destination of the voyage and the number of ships they happen to meet on the coast. To Bonny or Old and New Calabar, a voyage is usually performed in about 10 months. Those to the Windward and Gold Coast are rather more uncertain, but in general from 15 to 18 months. Okay, join me again. Do join me for the next video. Join me for the next video, giving a true account of the slave trade on the coast of Africa, taking people from Africa over to the Americas, the West Indies. Join me for the next video. Do so. Morel saying, take care for now.